This is your spiritual game plan, and I'm your host, Sherry Fletcher. Change. It happens to all of us. You've invested your time and energy into an important role, sometimes for years. Then suddenly it's time for you to move on. Maybe you've worked hard on a dream, and now your path is taking a new turn, but the dream isn't going with you. Perhaps you've raised your kids, and now they've moved on, but your empty nest is filled with parent care. Maybe you're in the middle of diaper changes and laundry piles. If you find yourself asking questions like, where do I fit in anymore? Am I even relevant? How do I find my purpose now? You are in the right place. This is the show for women in a season of transition. I believe that while your roles in life will change, your purpose is eternal. I'm here to help you understand just how intentionally you were made by a creator with a game plan. Through interviews and inspirational guests, we'll discover ways to help you unlock the purpose God placed in you, develop a game plan for your life's calling, and embrace the intentional masterpiece you were created to be. So when a writer, literary agent, and marketer of more than 20 years, and her mother, a doctor of counseling psychology, who is also an author and speaker, decide to collaborate, you get a book on the dynamics of mother-daughter relationships. Today, I'm going to be talking with Blythe Daniel and her mother, Dr. Helen McIntosh, about their book, Mended, Restoring the Hearts of Mothers and Daughters. Whether it is your desire to mend a broken relationship, make a strong one even better, or learn how to forgive and find peace with one that cannot be restored, it is my prayer that you will be encouraged and enlightened by our conversation. I would like to welcome Blythe and her mother, Dr. Helen, to the show today. Thank you guys for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Mm-hmm.
So Blythe, you are joining us from Colorado, and Dr. Helen, you are in Georgia, which is my neighbor.
Yes, I'm just south of you, not by much.
That's exciting. So Blythe, I would love to start with you, and I'd love to hear a little bit about your family and also how 2020 has shaped your ministry and how it will go forward in 2021.
Well, Sherry, I do have a wonderful husband and 3 children. And so our children have spent some time at home learning this year, and will hopefully be able to return to the classroom in 2021. But I will say that this year has really brought us closer together. We've spent more time together as a family. We've intentionally talked about some things that we haven't really talked about before as a family, about what it means to be a Christian in this day and age, and what sacrifices we have to make, and how we need to stand up for our faith. So our kids have been really aware of the stances that they need to take in life, and just really having to learn new ways of learning, drawing closer to family, and definitely our faith has really, I would just say, been increased as our love for Jesus has shown us that we need to make sure that we're spending enough time with him, and not just on the things that you can do from home these days with electronics and everything else. So it's really sharpened us. I would say it's really propelled us 2020 to take a look at the ministry that's God's given us as a family. We all serve at our local church. And so just excited for this year, seeing the end of it, but also just what God has for us in 2021.
Amen. Dr. Helen,
Okay.
hear a little bit about what's going on with you and how 2020 has shaped your ministry going forward.
Thank you, Sherry. I live with my wonderful husband of 52 years.
Wow.
He is just fabulous. In fact, we just returned from a physical therapy session, and I always introduce him as my fabulous husband. And they said, oh, here comes fabulous husband. So he is a real treasure. And then our son, Blythe's brother, Brian, lives maybe 20 minutes away with his wife and 2 adult daughters. So I'm surrounded by a little bit of family. And, you know, we have all felt the ache of the disconnect that presents itself to all of us. And so that's been kind of interesting, because I've had a lifetime of counseling studies that talk about dysfunction and disconnection and course, God speaks so much about how we're built for relationship. And so when everyone's just having such a hard time, I've been thinking, yes, God's word is so true. We were built for a relationship with him and with others. And everybody's having a real hard time being separated. Isn't that interesting? One of the principles, I guess, that I have lived by or wanted to live by for so many decades is that I wanted to be okay no matter what my circumstances were. And I've really been put to the test, but God is so good. These have been the hardest couple of years that I've ever had. I started chemo 3.5 years ago when it was discovered that I had stage 3 lymphoma. So I just found out yesterday, Sherry, that I am in total remission. Oh my goodness, it was Pearl Harbor Day, but I had my own victory that I'm that I'm in remission and out of any thought of cancer. But chemo and Parkinson's did a number on my feet, and I can't walk unless I'm on a walker. So it's really hard to just one of my feet works and the other does not. So much of the time I look like a flamingo. I can put full weight on one foot, but not the other. But God has really given me great joy. And in these dark times, I mean, it's just been a very big challenge to operate, to function. But God has given me great joy. And so I've loved that principle, and it does work, that God can make us be okay, allow us to be okay, no matter what. Now, in the darkest of times, I really have found worship of him and gratitude to just be the absolute right and left arm of what I do. So in the dark times, special songs have just ministered to me, and so I'm doing well. Doing well. Thank you.
I love it. I can see the joy in your face. And so just that in itself is a ministry. So keep that up. It's inspiring. And so talking about joy, I like to have some fun facts before we dig into the meat of the book. So Dr. Helen, I want to get a little scoop here on Blythe. Growing up, was there a food that she just did not like, but you did ask her to at least try it?
Now, we both adored chocolate, so we were on safe ground there. But I had begun, when she was a young girl, I had begun a study of nutrition and wanted to try all these new things. And my fabulous husband calls it monkey food. But he would say, well, you can try anything you want to, as long as you just don't tell me what's in it, or if it tastes okay, that'll be great. So Blythe was subject to a lot of experimentation of healthy eating, and now she really does prefer that, and it's worked out okay, hasn't it, Blythe?
That's right. Yeah.
That's awesome. I have done the same with my kids too. And so they could probably share with Blythe their trauma of all the green smoothies and things that kale got added to. So Blythe, I'm going to have you do a fun fact on your mom. Is there something that your mother is known for, like a rote answer that she would give you or continues to give you, that you can think of right off the top of your head?
Well, when she has mothered me and my brother, and then she's been grandmother to 5, there are things that come out from her counseling abilities, and she's never wanted to just absolutely force us to do something or make us do something. And so she gives us choices. And so one example that I can think of is that she's helped us by saying, these are the choices, this or this. And so instead of like just automatically squashing whatever we're thinking or making us feel like we have to do something, there are choices involved. And so I love that. And then my brother's daughter has been known to then repeat that back to my mom as a young girl. So her legacy has continued, but she's really great at helping us look at what the choices are without making our decisions for us.
That is a gift. I love that. And that's something I need to continue thinking of, even though I'm pretty much quote unquote done, but I like that outlook. Thank you. There is one question that I ask every single guest on here, so I want you both to answer. That question is, looking back on your life now, how far back can you go and see the very purpose you are living out today in who you have always been? Blythe?
I would say that as a young girl, I would go with my mom when she would go and speak at different Christian women's clubs. And I loved going with her and seeing women declare their faith in Jesus. And I think that even then, something was planted in my heart. I was probably about 9, 10 years old. And seeing that people would make a decision for Jesus, and that really stayed with me through my growing up years. And when I was finishing college, I remember thinking that I wanted to help Christians have a voice in our world, and I wanted to help them, whether it was through the media or it was through books or articles or whatever it was, that was the outlet that I was to help. At that time, I probably called the term evangelize, but as a younger girl, it was just being saved or getting accepted into God's family. But I think it was those moments of going with mom on mission, so to say, that helped me see that I could be a part of something as well like that. And so that's how far I can think back. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the term agent, because it can be used as an agent for Christ and for delivering that message. And I love that. How about you, Dr. Helen?
Thank you. As Blythe was sharing, I thought, yes, I remember being a 9 or 10-year-old little girl sitting in an Air Force chapel in Germany, asking God if I could be a missionary for him one day, and having a heart for God, which led me to think that I was a Christian, but I really wasn't, because zoom ahead many years after that, I was sitting in a gathering when somebody said, is there a time that you can remember inviting Christ into your life as Savior and Lord? And I had a heart for him, but I had never known to invite him in. And as I thought about it recently, Blythe was in my womb when I became a Christian. So isn't that so interesting that we've been tied together in ministry for a long time? Isn't that fun?
I love seeing the fingerprints. I just love going back and seeing how God was so purposeful all along.
Yes.
So I'm having you guys on today to talk about a book that you wrote together, Mended, Restoring the Hearts of Mothers and Daughters. And I have to say, you guys are very brave, but also so inspiring to put yourselves out there in the public on this topic, because it is such a hard one. Even for the best of daughter and mother and daughter relationships, it's a vulnerable situation. And so I'd like to know, as we get started, why is it important to the both of you to write this book, and especially together?
I think that because we've known so many other mothers and daughters in our life, that have really had difficulties in their relationship with their mothers or daughters, we really wanted to put together a resource that would help for those individuals that didn't see that they could have a good relationship at all. And so we just have seen how mother and daughter relationships can be beautiful or really difficult. And so for us to be able to see someone gaining a better relationship with a mother or daughter, like there was just nothing more that we could think of that would be better than that. And I think also to just really give people hope that no matter if your mother or daughter does come closer to you, you can still have a great life with God, and knowing that you've done everything that you can with your mother or daughter. And so it doesn't disqualify you from having good relationships with other people, but there's hope for you, and that we're not waiting on something to potentially happen one day with a relationship before we can say my life is good. Like God's given us the opportunities to take what we have and make the most of it. And so those would be my responses.
Thank you.
Well,
yes, Dr. Helen.
I was going to say, I can still see us sitting at a certain table near her home in Colorado Springs when she's tossed the idea out of our doing a book together, and I said, why people do not want to hear about our good relationship. That's just not going to fly. I said, and I really wouldn't be interested in just a book that says we are so happy. But the counselor part of my heart was saying, I want to help men. So counselors are famous for loving problems. And I said, if we can include, the many ways that relationships could be mended, then I'm in. So that was how it got started.
That's beautiful. And this book covers so much, and we're going to be discussing some of the key points. But I want to get started with an understanding of where mothers and daughters most often get it wrong or have a conflict. I know that you talk about some of the common conflicts that we have, but why is it that we get it wrong?
Boy, women are pretty strong-willed, aren't we? We know what we want. We're very emotional and strong in our thoughts and feelings. And so I think one of the ways that we start to have conflict is that you put women together who know what they want, or even at times if there's a little bit of ambiguity in our relationship, just as mothers and daughters, you are, as a daughter, imprinted upon by your mother. Like God has just, even mothers and daughters even look alike. And so a lot of times, and so we bear a lot of the same qualities, resemblances. And so often a mother might try to control or change her daughter. And they're looking for a certain type of results, or they're looking for a certain way for her daughter to grow up. And I did this with my two daughters, with when it came to how they even dressed for church. And how this played out was I was attempting to control what they looked like and how they even presented themselves to others at church. And so when they felt that control from me about even what they wore, I was sending the message that it matters what you look like on the outside and not who you are on the inside. Like, you have to go to church looking in your best, finest clothes. And what I was really sending the message of is that that's more important than your relationship with Jesus as we worship him there and as we go and learn about him. So I stopped putting out clothes for them to wear, and I stopped insisting that they wear their nicer clothes that I had spent, good money on. And what really came out of that was a freedom, because they didn't feel like I was trying to change them or control them. And so it's actually made our Sunday mornings a lot smoother, where I'm not expecting them to come out looking like how I would want them to look. So I've had to just really watch myself, and even just, recently we bought some new dresses, and I thought this would be a perfect time for them to wear these. But, if they sense any sense of what I would want for them, it really causes us as daughters to push back. And so, maybe mom can speak to the mother side of that and the daughter side, because she experienced it as well with her mom. But that's where I think it's the change and control that we often project.
Blythe, that I'm glad you talked about letting go, and boy, letting go of expectations is so tough. But if we don't let go, it is a killer both to you and the relationship. It's a tough area. It really is. Another rough terrain is those unfinished conversations that we have with mothers and daughters, well, family relationships, period. There are unmet needs there, and everyone can feel it. Oh, it's that walking on eggshells feeling, that feeling in your stomach. When things are not right. And that's what Blythe and I long to help others with in this book. They often don't know what to do and what to say. So we've provided maybe 3 dozen, when you say, Blythe, conversation starters that people can just at least begin to break the ice, so to speak. And it's very simple and very respectful. And an example would be, what I want is a good relationship. What do you think we need to do to make things better? So you're putting the tennis ball over in their court and which is very humbling because usually the straighter outers, the ones that see the problem, feel like they have to make all the suggestions and straighten everybody out.
Yeah.
So this is a way of getting the other person to feel honored and let them put out their thoughts first, and then you certainly can.
Yeah.
Another principle
Yeah, go ahead.
I really love is inviting yourself in, and we can talk more about that later if you wish.
Yeah, no, we have a question that covers that. I like how you I like that there are conversation starters in that, because a lot of times where I think we go wrong is we come at someone with the solution we want.
Yes.
And it immediately shuts them down. And that's one thing I like about the title, Mended. But some people might look at that title and say, well, my relationship isn't broken. I've got this great relationship, so I might not need this information. But one of the concepts that you share in there in the book is about strains on the relationship that will lead to breaking. And so I think I can confidently say every mother-daughter relationship, no matter how wonderful it is, have those strains. So what are some of the indicators that we can look for to help us recognize those strains? And if we recognize them, why is it that we choose to ignore them or wait too long to work on them?
Well, they're difficult and it's awkward and we're in uncertain terrain. But I'd say one of the times, I'll just use some recent examples. Blythe heard me say this. I believe that every word we say is important, the word and the message that we're giving. And so relationships is, of course, an ongoing thing. And so we just never let up as far as taking good care and being respectful. And I have found myself, even in the last month, texting Blythe. We do that often, but rereading it. And there have been a couple of times I've thought, well, boy, I sound bossy. Let me delete that. So I edit my own text to her because I want every word that goes to her to be just right and that I don't come across as controlling or whatnot. So it's important, every word, every message. What do you think?
I think some of the strains that come into the relationship are that we have a need to be right. And we need to remember that the relationship is more important than who is right. You know, in human nature, we don't really like to be told that's wrong, or we don't like to feel like we don't have an answer for something. But when it comes to these very delicate relationships between family members, it's really life-giving to just even say, I don't have the answer to that. I don't know. And you're more important to me than me having the right answer, or than me being right, or than you being right. But just to even say that it's more important for this relationship to thrive, for us to be good, than it is for either one of us to be right. And so let's make sure that we're keeping the relationship at the center of things. And then I think that also, as Mom alluded to earlier, it's so helpful to be able to ask permission to give advice or feedback when you're talking to a family member, son or a daughter, or mother or father, because a lot of us want to start in and have that right answer, but we haven't really even allowed ourselves to ask, is it okay for me to give you some feedback? Are you okay with my giving you a suggestion? Or are you okay with my sharing something that I see? Because that just really honors the relationship. And I think that's probably what we're saying most of all in our book, Mended, is that when we honor each other, even if there's a strain and there's a difficulty, it does help win us back to each other. It does help with that chasm that's between us. And so I think that when we are asking if it's okay to give feedback, or asking for permission to give some advice, it really helps us to share our words with each other and not shove them on each other. And so that would be the thing that I would say, that when we can recognize that we feel weighted down in the relationship, our son or daughter or our mother or father is probably feeling it as well. So we just want to back up and then ask, hey, is it okay if we talk about this now? And even just ask if this isn't a good time, when could we talk about it? Because we want to be sensitive to the timing of the words that Mom just referenced are so important.
I really liked the phrase share, not shove. That That one stuck. That one is a keeper. I'm gonna have to keep that one because I have one that I like. Pray, don't say, but now I'm gonna have share, don't shove. Thank you for that. And so I like, again, we're talking about initiating conversations, and you do have some great conversation starters. I'm going to say for me, the hardest thing for me in my relationship with my daughter when it comes to initiating tough conversations is to think how to say something that will invite her into communication, not close her down. But also I have to be honest and say that sometimes I might not initiate it because I am scared of what the answer might be. And one thing I like about, not only do you give conversation starters, but you also give some great scriptures to go along with how to listen and how to hear and receive. And I didn't know if you guys have one that you really rely on, that comes to your mind right off the bat before you start a conversation, or when you're hearing. Which Bible verse do you personally rely on?
There are so many, but one of the main ones, of course, on the subject that you're bringing up, is a soft answer covers wrath. In other words, oh gosh, I just had a little lapse. What is it? A soft answer
turns away wrath.
Turns away wrath. And I see that so often. It's just, it's hard because we're contextual. But if we can remember that it's the relationship that we're going after, and it's not whether we're going to be right or wrong. And so we want to maintain that relationship. But Blythe and I really love another verse, and that's Ephesians 6:13. It's the having done all to stand, in that section about the armor. And what it's so hard in relationships, we often wonder, well, have I done enough? And I think God's answer in that verse is the having done all. We do all that he shows us to do, and then we stand and have no regrets. In other words, we're not saying you are responsible for the outcome of the relationship, because you're not. That would be an improper boundary. But God will tell us when we've done everything we know to do. And these conversation starters are meant to at least open wide that chasm. And even if we blow it with the person we're talking to, you can say, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to offend you or bring up something difficult. Maybe we can table this and talk about it another time. We'll leave it, as they say on the air, we'll leave it right there.
I think one of the verses that Mom has referenced is so great when we're speaking to the other person. And then if we're listening for God to help us know what to say, because that's what you mentioned, Sherry, which is so great about, like, how do I approach the person? Even not knowing how that answer is going to go, we might think that it's going to be a difficult response that they're going to give us. But in Jeremiah 33:3, where he says, call to me and I will answer you. This is God saying, call to me and I will answer you. And I will tell you great and mighty things which you do not know. And so sometimes we don't know what to say or how to initiate a conversation, but when we pray and ask God very specifically, God, I want you to show me what I need to say. Like, he is so faithful. We aren't just asking him for the big decisions in life and what am I going to do with my life and how am I going to raise these kids? But we're asking for specific conversations, and he loves to give those to us. And so I think sometimes we forget in those moments, we think it's all up to us to have the great wise words, but God tells us to call on him and ask him, and he'll show us.
A wonderful thing in our culture is to be transparent. We are such a fake culture, mostly. So it's almost refreshing when a mother or daughter says to the other one, I'm uncomfortable bringing this up, or I feel nervous bringing this up, or, to just be completely honest about your feelings. It's so humbling, and you can say, this is so awkward for me, but could we start a conversation about such and such? And it's really endearing. I think our young people really relate well to that when we we share with them how we tremble also. It's a connector.
Yeah. Dr. Helen, I have a question for you because I've just been so inspired on your ability to have broken a pattern and a cycle in motherhood. And I have to say that I am someone that uses sometimes sarcasm to make a point, and it's hurtful. And a lot of times I will say it and then really wish I hadn't. And I can see the hurt in their eyes. And then I realize, as a mother, I have so much potential to cause a lot of pain. And I know that you've had to grapple with that. And it's just so admirable in the cycle you broke. But I would love a little glimpse for our listeners to know how you got through that and how you were able to, how God has brought you through what you experienced with your mom.
Thank you. Well, my mother had some wonderful qualities, but she also was very, she had a lot of personal issues, and I was the scapegoat. So I would say, to summarize, she really was an angry, verbally abusive mom that would say to me, "You can't do anything right," just rage, really. And it was so painful for those decades of my early upbringing that I did determine, even though I wasn't a believer yet, had not settled my salvation until later in my 20s. But in those terrible years, there was a voice inside of me that I remember thinking, I don't want to ever do this to a child of my own. So I had purpose, but we know that's not enough. But I built in some accountability, and growing up, I did tell my children, Brian and Blythe, that I did not want to be this, this, and this, that I didn't want to be angry, and I didn't want to say terrible words to them and send terrible messages. And I remember when Blythe was headed off to college, I said, "Blythe, please, this detachment may make me become a little more controlling than I need to be. And I want to break that control that my mother had on me. So if you sense that I'm going to be controlling, or that I've spoken in a controlling way, here's what you need to tell me so that we can correct Mama." And I said, "You would just say, 'Mom, I'm really sensing some control here.'" And as best I know, I don't think she ever made that phone call to me, but I did build in the accountability. So a great conversation mothers can have with their children is, "Children, I am becoming really aware of some of the dark places in my life, and places that are not well yet. And if you hear these things, this is not my intention. I would not hurt you for anything. And I would like to go ahead and ask forgiveness for the times I've wounded you. Will you forgive me? I'm so sorry for these times." But that way, it's not a family secret. You've shared with them your hidden places of the heart, and they're joining in with you to help you get well. It's a sweet relationship. It really is. I still have that kind of conversation with Blythe, don't I, Blythe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a gift. And, the title of my podcast is Your Spiritual Game Plan. And what you've just shown there is that you have had a spiritual game plan on how to break the cycle. And you've also given Blythe, who I'm sure has in turn given her kids, a game plan on how to handle a situation before it happens, so that the strain and the conflict can be avoided. And I just admire that so much. And you've worked so hard to break these patterns. And Blythe, I'd love to hear your perspective on, the strength of watching your mom be able to do this and how it has carried over with your relationship with your daughters.
Watching my mom be intentional to talk about things with her mom. When she would, I watched how her mom treated her, and how hurtful that was to my mom. And so, mom didn't necessarily have as many words as she does now. She did try to address things with her mom, and there was a certain level of healing there. But as I watched mom really grow and become really bold in her words with her loving words with her mom, it really did show me how you can confront in love. And that even though their relationship wasn't perfect, they did the best with what they could. And I think that's for most people what they want to know, is that they are doing the best with what they can. We know mothers and daughters that say, I'll probably never have a good relationship because of where we've been in our lives. And we want to encourage that woman who is in that place, because we know that not every relationship will be healed on this side of heaven. And we pray that our hearts would be healed, not just relationships. So even if the relationships don't come back together the way that you would want them to, or you recognize where you were not parented well, such as where, mom recognized some places that were really left out of her experience growing up with her mom, that we can say, God, would you come in and restore those areas of my heart? Like, I know that I didn't get that from my natural parents, but I need this in order to move forward. Like, I need to feel like I'm valued and I'm loved and I'm seen. And so I think there's just some ways that we're going to have to say, we don't understand why that happened. We don't understand why we all didn't get moms that gave us good words, such as the words that mom has given me. But we can say this, that we can set new generational patterns, that even if you didn't get these things, that there's still ways that you can do this for your future family or the family that you have now. And one of the ways that we encourage people to look at what has taken place in your family and how can you change things is to really create what we call a generational family tree. We all had to make these probably in some time in school, where we diagrammed, who was married to who and who had which kids. But you know what, if we start going back and doing that, and even putting out to the side, like, this person expressed anger, or this person was an alcoholic, or this person was abusive and I felt uncomfortable around him, we can start to see what are some of the patterns that we need to break, and we need to be able to stop those. And some of those patterns has produced anger, or it's caused us to feel like we're not valued and seen and loved. And so we both encourage people to go back and just give some thought to who are those people in your life. Diagram out what are the things that maybe you get a sense of anger when something doesn't go right with your daughter, and maybe that's how you responded as a young girl. And so when we can see any anxiety or fear, or just any patterns that we have that aren't healthy, and how those have affected us, I think it's really helpful to put some of these things into words and go to God with them and say, God, I need to first ask your forgiveness for these things in my heart, and then, if possible, go to the person that has, either you're the daughter or you're the mother, go to the person and talk to them about it. And so we just think it's really helpful to name what you're feeling, and to be able to say, God, I need restoration in this area because I don't want to go forward the way that I've been in the past.
Yeah, and you mentioned a concept in your book, and I think it's Dr. Helen that mentions a concept on a sandwich, how to do this in a sandwich way. Will you share with us what your sandwich is?
Okay. Well, the meat of a sandwich would represent the concern that you have, that you want to share with the other person. But you have could attest, I'm sure, to a lifetime of when we rush in with the meat, it's not usually well received, as concerned as we may be. And so I have made a practice of encouraging people to invite yourself in and then put on a top bun on that sandwich with all the sesame seeds you can muster. In other words, it would be just some positive things you can say. And then you can say, but I have a concern. Can we talk about it? And then you get that permission to enter the conversation, and they have sort of an alert flag that here's coming something hard. But because you put a soft bun on it, top and bottom, it just goes down better. And so again, what you'd say is, well, you'd say, what I want is a good relationship, and I hope that you don't mind if we have a little chat. I have a concern about something. May I share it? And then they say yes or no. And then you can go right down to the bottom bun and say, but I know that we'll do better after we're able to discuss this. So it's just an easy way. So if any of those terms help your audience, go for it. I'm thinking about the original diving board for this book came out of Isaiah 58:12 that talks about how God would long for us to be repairers of the breach. And so this is just the conversation that goes with the repair of the breach, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think we all want a healthy relationship, whether it's with anyone, even if someone listening doesn't have a daughter. This has been so helpful with conversations with anyone, even employees, a relationship. Just remember that sandwich. And Blythe, as you were talking about the family tree, really paying attention to where the hurts have come from and trying to understand if you have a parent that you're not getting some of these nurturing qualities from, what were their parents like, looking at that family tree. And you guys mentioned in the book, it's kind of like when two cups hit. I would love to have you share with my audience the 2-cup concept too, because that's so helpful.
If you would imagine 2 coffee cups bumping, and on each coffee cup draw a little heart, and then out of each cup draw some liquid coming out. And what I like to share is it's a boundary conversation as well, that what's in your heart is what comes out when you're bumped, and that and so those are the issues that we need to take care of that are personal for us, and it's not okay to blame the other person. I mean, for instance, if I had gotten angry with my children, it was tempting to say, this is my mother's fault. But of course it wasn't. It was, the upset was coming out of my own cup. So cups bumping is a helpful tool. It's a visual to help people to just take responsibility for what comes out of their cup. And boy, it's a tough one. But it does help us to own what are the issues coming out of our heart. I love the verse in Proverbs that says to take care of the issues of your heart, that is what comes out of our heart. And so I think that's one of my very favorite visuals. And I think sometimes we often take too much responsibility at times, as well as not enough responsibility for our issues. And so it's a clarifier, isn't it?
It is.
And yeah, the scripture that Mom's referring to in Proverbs 4:23, it says to guard our hearts, for out of it comes the issues of life. Or in some translations, it says that our hearts are the source of life. So whatever we're putting into our heart, like whatever thoughts, whatever words that we're kind of meditating on, is going to come out in some form or fashion. And so it's so important to just remember that what comes out of our mouth is really coming out of our hearts, that we've probably already been thinking about it. It's already settled there. And it's just a good idea to just sometimes even just take a mental, sometimes I'll do like a thing of like, why am I feeling such and such? Why am I wanting to respond this way? And even pausing before we respond to a child or an adult, because we can't take back the words that we've already spoken. And Mom has this other idea of the scrambled eggs principle, that you can't unscramble the eggs once it's out there. And so once we say these words, it's a lot harder to take them back. That's when we go into, forgiveness and ask for forgiveness. But we can do a lot of preemptive work if we just would be, and I'm speaking to myself as well, if we would just consider the words that we're going to say, if we would just pause before we say something and decide, is this going to bring life or death into our relationship? Is this word going to be edifying and helpful? Or is this just going to cause the strains that you were talking about earlier, Sherry? Is this going to cause strain between us? And neither one of us is going to feel good. Even though I have the right to say this, it's going to cause there to be some tension between us. And so it's just better for me to just swallow my pride and just move towards the person and to the relationship, and not try to be someone that's pointing out their wrongs. And I think that's something for me that I really have to think about when I'm in conversation, especially with my daughters.
Yes, I tend to want to give suggestions. So you mentioned a good word, and I want to, as we wrap up, I want to cover that word, and that is forgiveness. And that is a simple word and a super hard concept, not only to ask for, but also to extend. And so you guys have 3 types of forgiveness in the book. And as we wrap up, I'd love if you'd unpack those 3 types, share a little bit about them. And how does that look, even if a relationship might not be able to be mended, such as maybe a mother or a daughter has already deceased, or one that is unwilling to work on the relationship? How does forgiveness look in these areas?
Mm-hmm. So the 3 types of forgiveness, first would be the forgiveness that we receive from God when we say, God, I realize that I need you in my life, and I recognize the things that I've done that have kept me apart from you. And this would be a moment of you becoming a believer in Jesus, to say, God, I'm inviting you into my life, and I need your forgiveness for all the things that I've done to separate from you. And that as a result of my choices and my actions, I'm separated from you. And so that's the first type of forgiveness, is the forgiveness that we ask from God. And then the other type of forgiveness that we ask forgiveness for is from another person, the person that you have offended. And so growing up, we were taught to say something like, I'm sorry for, and then fill in the blank. And then, so name it what it was that you did, and then will you forgive me? Or it could even say, like, I have I've hurt you by such and such. I can tell that I've hurt you. Will you forgive me for that? And so we're talking about not making this long and drawn out, but just really addressing it very specifically. Even kids, can do this. But the third area that's really tough is forgiveness to another person who has hurt you, when you felt offended and they haven't even asked your forgiveness. And so us holding on to that unforgiveness is really toxic for us, and it really poisons other relationships. And so not to forgive them is a sense of control. And sometimes we like that sense of like holding on to, I'm not ever going to forgive this person. I'm not even going to forget what they've done. But that again is a lot about power and control. And that's not how God responds to us. He is so loving and forgiving, and we need to follow that model and offer forgiveness. And so it might be saying to the other person, I choose to forgive you for how I have felt hurt by you. Something that simple. Now, if the person, and that might take form of a letter, or it might take place in a conversation, to just release that person and let that go, because us holding on to it really is detrimental. And so if a person, as you mentioned, Sherry, is no longer living, and you're wanting to just clear the air, even though the person's no longer in your life, and just let go of that, like chains falling off, as Mom referenced earlier, the chains that we get held up in, is to be able to say, God, I know that I need to release this unforgiveness in my heart. And so I'm choosing today to let go of the unforgiveness that I have. And I choose to forgive this person in my life for the harm and the hurt that they've caused me. And I ask you to come in, because that person can't physically ask me, but I ask you to come in and restore those places in my heart. And so it's so good to even go to God and to say, God, I need forgiveness too. I played a part in it in some way. And I think that sometimes we always just expect the other person, but we don't necessarily take responsibility for how we could have changed things or done things differently. And so it's just really good to own up to our responsibilities, as Mom said, with the bumped cups. But then to just seek the Lord, continually seek Him, especially if we're struggling. It's not usually just a one-time, God, I'm going to come and forgive. Like, I'm going to continue to come to you, God, when I feel some sense of regret that things didn't work out and we didn't get healing. I'm going to continue to come to you and ask you to continue and heal me deeper and deeper. And so we just need to remember that it's not usually even a one-time thing, that we need to be able to come back to God and say, I need you to continue to work in my heart.
Beautiful, Blythe. That was a great summary. And just one thing for the one that whose parent perhaps has gone on, like my mother, she really never told me the words. She never asked my forgiveness. And I after she passed away, I had to grieve the fact that I would never see some mending. We had a lot of mending, but not as much as I'd wished. And so for those listeners that are in that situation, I hope you'll find some helpers that can help you grieve some of the losses that you've experienced, because it is tough. But grief is all about loss and change, and to grieve not having that part of your life. But you can do this. Once it's done, you'll have great liberty, and you can again know that you did everything you could to make it happen. And we just can't make people do the right thing, can we? As much as we'd like to, that would be control. So we let go of that, but we grieve it.
Yes. Well, thank you guys for joining me today and blessing my audience and sharing so much. Again, the book is Mended, Restoring the Heart of Mothers and Daughters. And it's just what God wants is restoration. And so I know that these words will be a blessing to others. And I just want to thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having us, Sherry. We're very honored. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sherry.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. I really loved the analogy of the two cups that get bumped, and what comes out of those cups is what is inside. Proverbs 4:23 reminds us to guard our hearts. Our hearts are the source of life, and what comes out of our mouth is what is coming out of our hearts. Links to the book Mended, Restoring the Heart of Mothers and Daughters, as well as links to connect with Blythe and Dr. Helen, will be in the show notes. If you have not subscribed already to Your Spiritual Game Plan podcast, please do so at this moment so you do not miss up and coming episodes. When you leave a rating and an honest review, that helps me serve you better as well as helps others find the podcast. During today's episode, did a friend come to mind who you know would be blessed with today's message? If so, be sure to share the link with them. Listeners like you sharing links with their friends is how this podcast can reach more people. Be sure to subscribe to my mailing list to receive weekly updates, exclusive content, and new episodes delivered right to your inbox. Thank you so much for tuning in to Your Spiritual Game Plan, the podcast that helps you understand that God's got a plan and you have a purpose in it.